I was wrong. I thought I had it figured out. I thought the story was over. So you can imagine my surprise when I opened YouTube and saw the thumbnail for the next upload in the Oldest View series. A story that I had assumed was a closed book until now. I had spent countless hours researching and analysing the story, pacing the video frame by frame, believing that everything I had seen was all I would get. How wrong I was. Welcome back to the world of the Oldest View. Just before we begin, if you haven't seen my previous video analysing the first 4 parts of the Oldest View, I highly encourage you to watch that before continuing. It'll get you completely up to speed on the characters and lore surrounding the story, but feel free to jump straight into this one if you'd like. I can't stop you. So without further delay, let's dive in, dissect, and analyse the hidden meaning behind the newest entry of Kane Pixel's The Oldest View. We find ourselves just outside the entrance to the mall, overgrown with foliage. The door slowly opens, and we can see that the mall has changed since the last time we saw it. We cut to the ending of a panel discussing the ongoing construction of the Dallas Midtown project.
Thank you again to all of the
And then to a shot of Wyatt, exactly where we found him at the end of part 3. The grass has begun to grow around him, yet Wyatt's body is preserved without any signs of decomposition. Structures can be seen imposed over the looming clouds above. As a bright light begins to seep through the darkness, illuminating the figure we know as the Rolling Giant, Julian Reverchon.
Oh shit.
We're back in the mall as seen at the end of part 3. The giant chases Wyatt towards the emergency exit, moments away from falling to his death. But something is different this time. Wyatt manages to climb inside the exit and begin making his way up the stairs. The architecture is markedly different from the entrance, and before long, Wyatt finds himself outside once again, narrowly avoiding the clutches of the giant and his own demise. Wyatt runs along the worn track and escapes into the forest, clutching his left arm. Anatomically modern humans have existed for approximately 300,000 years. Recorded history accounts for roughly 1.6% of this time. Wyatt manages to find his car and takes a second to compose himself. He checks his phone, but there's no reception and his maps are offline. He looks out the surrounding windows and begins his drive back home. But Wyatt isn't alone. The sound of the giant's rolling wheels can be heard, accompanying him as a passenger on his journey. The Oldest View Dispersal is quite a lot shorter than its last entry, but that doesn't mean that there's any less hidden details to find, and give us clues as to where the story is headed. So let's go through the video again with a fine-tooth comb, and see what we can find. The first scene shows us a door, The very same door at the very end of the long set of stairs leading into the bathroom. A kind of liminal space acting as a transition between the world above and the mall. It's become overgrown with plants, but it isn't due to the passage of time, as you can clearly hear the sound of Wyatt falling to his death at the end of part 3. It's only then does the door begin to open. Inside is what's supposed to be the mall, but if we brighten the scene a bit, we can see that the inside has changed dramatically. It looks just like a forest, the same as you'd find on the surface. But this scene recontextualizes a lot of the information we'd seen at the end of part 3. The last we'd seen of Wyatt, he had fallen to his death. We'd assumed that he had somehow made his way back to the surface, yet now we can confirm that when Wyatt died, he never actually left the mall. What we are seeing here is another instance of the mall, even further in time than the overgrown state we witnessed in part 3. It explains why Wyatt's body hadn't yet decomposed, even though the plants had grown longer. The mole had simply shifted to another state shortly after his death. It also explains how the giant was somehow able to transport Wyatt's body back to the surface. The answer being, he didn't. The giant just continued to watch his body from a distance. The next scene shows us a conference held 11 months ago, and the closing statements made by Scott Beck, CEO and president of Beck Ventures, as well as the master development partner for the Dallas Midtown project. Scott details the first steps toward the creation of Dallas Midtown, starting with a mixed-use building of 26,000 square feet, dedicated to retail, restaurants, and apartments, to begin construction in January 2024. Though it's yet unknown if Beck Ventures has yet to secure the necessary grants. We see dark clouds forming overhead, with what I believe to be the red flags that were found throughout the previous entries in the foreground. A hole begins to open, shining a beacon of light directly onto the giant. From Julian's position to the hole above, I do think he is standing on the stairs leading to the surface, staring out at the same hole that Wyatt entered in episode 2. It's interesting that if this is indeed the same hole, it possesses the ability to both open and close under specific circumstances, which might be the reason that the mole had managed to stay hidden from the outside. We cut back to the last moments of episode 3. The events play out almost identically, including Wyatt's body found on the ground level. Yet somehow, Wyatt is able to escape his death and divert to another sort of parallel timeline. It's a reality in which he doesn't know that he had fallen, and is somehow able to escape. It's unclear what caused the divergence, yet Kane Pixels has clarified that this isn't a retcon. The events of episode 3 still happened, and Wyatt is still dead. Yet what we're seeing is an alternate version of events. Let me try to explain. Somewhere during the events of the oldest view, another snapshot is taken of the mall. In this instance, Wyatt plays through the story, falls to his death, and dies. The snapshot in which Wyatt is traversing the mall is projected again. The Wyatt that we follow through the events of the oldest view thus far is more than likely not the original Wyatt, but a playback of the events that happened the first time round, as clearly shown by Wyatt's original body. Yet somehow, a fork in the road has occurred, and the Wyatt in Dispersal has managed to navigate past his inevitable death and discover a new version of events. As soon as Wyatt climbs inside the emergency exit, it is immediately clear that the world has changed. The mall he looks back at is not the same one he was standing in moments earlier, evident by the hanging A of AMC, which was securely fastened just before. Wyatt isn't aware of the alternate version of events and begins to scale the stairs and leave the mall. The architecture of the exit is different from the entrance. There's a strange hole in the wall, and the lights are no longer present. It gives the impression that this passage isn't as widely used or maintained as well as the entrance. Wyatt escapes outside as an eerie song plays in the background. The song, in fact, is titled Jebel Erhud and is composed by Kane Pixels. And if we type the title into Google, we can find a little more information about the inspiration. An archaeological site located in Morocco. The reason why this is important is that the fossils that were found here were human, dating as far back as 300,000 years. The remains were discovered during a cave expedition, found in the lower 13 levels of the 22 that had been identified, alongside tools known as Levallois Mousterian, which is another way of saying sharp rock. I believe this is what Kane was referring to in the statements made a little later in the video, in which anatomically modern humans have existed for approximately 300,000 years, and recorded history accounts for roughly 1.6% of this time. Its history long forgotten, only rediscovered centuries later through human interest, which is a theme I'll touch on a little later. But for now, Wyatt continues through the forest, clutching his left shoulder with his right hand. It stuck out as an odd detail since we don't really witness Wyatt getting hurt, but I have two theories. One is that even though Wyatt doesn't remember the events of his death, his body still feels the remnants of the pain, judging by the way he hit the ground, with his left arm rotated. Or two, is that Wyatt's arm was beginning to tire after holding his phone to film for the previous 45 minutes. Now keep in mind that in the beginning of part 3, we can clearly see that Wyatt is right-handed and holds his phone in the appropriate hand. So you're probably thinking, how is this connected? Well, I believe this is further evidence that suggests that Wyatt not only took an alternate path, but has now found himself in an alternate world. If we skip forward a bit, Wyatt enters his car and opens the maps on his phone. They're offline, but we can see that Wyatt seems to rotate the map as if it was upside down. The very reason the maps are offline and Wyatt having no reception is also strange, since when Wyatt looks through his side mirror, we can clearly see a radio tower atop the hill in the distance. There is reception in the area, but Wyatt's phone doesn't seem to connect to it, or can't connect to it, since his phone is not of this world. Now, I'm not entirely convinced of this, but I have seen a few people online suggest that there's a figure standing at the top of the hill in the distance, bearing a striking resemblance to the rolling giant. It's entirely possible, but I think I'm leaning more towards it being simply some shrubbery or a small tree. The last shot shows Wyatt driving back to town, but we can very clearly hear the wheels of the rolling giant alongside it. As much as I'd like to believe we're seeing the point of view of the giant speeding down the road, I don't think it's as literal as that. The camera points towards the sides and moves around like a person would move their head, indicating that we are still seeing things from Wyatt's perspective. So what does this all mean? Let's start with the title. Dispersal refers to the action or process of distributing or spreading things or people over a wide area. We know that this series has close ties to nature and flora through the character of the giant, Julian Revachon, a well-renowned botanist from Dallas, Texas. The term dispersal would, on the surface, refer to the action of spreading seeds for plants to grow. But in the context of the oldest view, from the events we've observed, we can think of these seeds as memories. Before the events of the oldest view, it wouldn't be a stretch to consider that neither you nor I had much of an understanding of the history behind Julian Revachon. the Parade of Giants, the founding of La Reunion, and everything in between that led to the present day. It's through Wyatt's eyes that we've come to build an understanding and recognise Julian Revachon and his achievements. Until Wyatt had found the mall, Julian was buried deep underground in an abandoned mall, alone and forgotten. The song that plays in the very first episode, overlaid over footage of the Giant's creation, is very reminiscent of these circumstances. When the Swallows Homeward Fly, a song about a man trying to cope with a heavy loss. I like to think this song is about Julian coming to terms with the fact that he has died, and the world has moved on. His time on Earth has come to an end, and that sooner or later, he would be forgotten. My poor heart, why do you cry? Once also you in peace will lie. All things on this earth must die. Will then we meet, you and I.
Parting, oh parting is grief and pain.
In the episode The Life of the Giant, we hear the song Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want, a song about longing for something out of reach. Julian reminisces about the time when he was known and celebrated for who he was and what he achieved, showcased in parades and becoming a staple attraction of the Valley View Mall. But all things eventually come to an end, and Julian is struggling to come to terms with the fact that his brief resurrection is again beginning to end. Now this is where it gets a bit crazy. The song that plays in Wyatt's car, Every Time Around by Vansire, is more hopeful than the others. The night gets cold, but there's smoke in the clouds. I'm having trouble sleeping, and it's stressing me out. The words may fall short of something profound, but every time I'm with you, I'm just glad you're around. And if you listen to the full song, it ends with the lyrics, the night got cold, there was smoke in the clouds. Then you came and found me when the world had me down. The words may fall short of something profound, but every time I'm with you, I'm just glad you're around. How's it sound? It's clear that the Giant's main objective is not to be forgotten, and sees a glimmer of hope in Wyatt to service that need. Kane Pixels previously stated in an interview, when asked about Part 4, that we are living in Part 4, and I think I finally understand what that means. The Oldest View tackles a lot of different themes, with the most prominent being nostalgia, memory, legacy, and decay, tying into the statement about only 1.6% of human history being recorded. The last of you disappears not when you die, but when your name is spoken for the last time, also known as the final death. Nearly 300,000 years worth of memories and consciousness has been lost to time, never to be uttered again. And without the events of The Oldest View, Julian Revachon very well could have become another statistic. The very last piece of Julian existed inside the Giant, a large papier-mâché caricature created in his image. With the last of the Valley View Mall destroyed, it and the mall remain only as a memory deep beneath the earth. When Wyatt first entered, Julian was deep in his anger at the world, pushing Wyatt away and leading him towards the exit. And it isn't until Wyatt's death that the Giant realizes that Wyatt wanted to stay and learn about the mall and its history. He becomes conflicted and at odds with how things turned out. Without Wyatt, he'd be alone once more. He realizes that Wyatt is his last chance to get what he wants. Reading the very first lyrics of Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want gives us an insight into the Giant's behaviour during this time. Good times for a change, see the luck I've had, can make a good man turn bad. Julian had become resentful and resigned himself to his fate. not realizing the opportunity laying in front of him. And so Wyatt's fate is undone, and he is free to leave and disperse his discovery of Julian Revachon. It's through Wyatt's actions of entering the mall, interacting with the giant, and subsequently uploading his footage to YouTube that Wyatt, and by proxy all of us, have resurrected the giant. The scene at the end of Dispersal, hearing the wheels of the giant along the drive, I believe is meant to represent the giant living on through Wyatt. It's a memory he would never forget, and is now embedded with the legacy of the giant to further spread through his own means. Julian's legacy lives on by the dispersal of his memory across the internet, and into the minds of each and every viewer of The Oldest View. The giant lives on through each and every one of us.